Hi everyone, I'm Tanya Paluso and this is Barry Green,
Hi.
and we are here to talk about the missing link, how to really overcome self-doubt and own your self-worth. And so in the introduction of this, I was talking about feeling like something is missing. And when I created this Google Hangout today and when I wrote down some of the information about it, this was really coming from my own experience of, I wrote, you've done a ton of work on yourself, you are experiencing success, but you want to go deeper. You know there's still a piece of you that doesn't fully own your power and worth. And this was me. I was having success with tribal truth, and there was a point where I was like, why do I keep sabotaging myself? Like, why am I still feeling so unfulfilled? What's going on? What's wrong with me? And so about a year ago, I met Barry Green and came to him and was looking for that missing piece. Like, what was that thing that was still holding me back? What was that blind spot that was in my way from truly having the happiness and the fulfillment and the peace? Because I just was constantly agitated, was not finding any peace in my heart. And went to him and he said, all right, are you ready to go to the root? You've done all this work on yourself and you've done all these personal development courses, but you're still missing something, and are you willing to truly go to that? Because that's the holy grail of personal development, I call it. It's really truly going as deep as you can go. So in this Google Hangout, Barry and I thought, let's just hang out. Let's have a conversation, almost like an interview where we can kind of riff back and forth with each other on the process, and give you just some information on what might be going on and how you can really tap into that piece for yourself. And also at the end, we'll offer an opportunity for you to work with us, because that's what we're doing, is taking people through the process of, it is a process of really discovering what that missing piece is, and then really and just really working with it so that it's no longer that thing that's having you doubt yourself, and so you can truly own all parts of yourself. For me, that's what self-worth is all about. So I wanted to start with introducing Barry and having him tell you a little bit about himself, and specifically his journey of how he started doing this work 35 years ago. So Barry's worked with thousands of people. He's created 5 holistic schools, Mind Body College being one of them, that he sold here in San Diego. He's written holistic textbooks. He's just worked with so many people and had so much success, and has really developed a process that works. And so I would love for him to start with Barry sharing with your experience of how you came to this place 35 years ago to do this work on yourself, and where you were before, in that similar situation that I was in, right? Of like, I've had all this success, but there's something missing, and being that truth seeker.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. I'm going to have to go back a little bit before 35 years, because that sets the foundation as to what happened 35 years ago, roughly. I was born into a very called traditional Jewish family, where there were roles that were played. My mom and dad were definitely very formal in how they were raised, and the role that they were supposed to be, and the woman did this and the man did that. And I apparently was born to be a very sensitive human being. I had no idea about that, but by the time I was 9 months old, I had severe asthma, which I personally can't. I've had 3 kids, a stepchild and 2 biological. I can't imagine my 9-month-old babies having severe asthma. It's just mind-boggling that you could hardly even survive past that as that small of a child. But it was described clearly as that, and in work that I've done for myself, I've had many clearings of asthma come up and choking through that. So that turned into severe allergies, and that lasted until my teens. And uh, my my father was virtually non-expressive. He talked to me 2 times as a father in my entire childhood, um, and infinite times I wished he would have said anything, or just punched me or kicked me, or said you're a jerk or something, and just validated what I was feeling was going on in him, and left me to complete interpretation. So all of my childhood, I only had one goal and agenda I really wanted for my life, and that was to be happy and to be healed and to find love. I didn't feel it with my mom. I didn't feel it with my dad, and I certainly didn't feel like I was good enough. They never told me that, but there was always extremely high expectations that I knew that I had to live up to, and like any child, I guess I was just set on automatic to do that, and there I was. So I became a very high achiever, became very smart, satisfy the basic Jewish stereotype. Definitely was in advanced classes, went to college, did extremely well, got into a job, did extremely well. I figured out, as any smart Jewish person does, um, how to live and make things work, mentally make things work. So I was able to be very successful at work, and decided that I wanted to find a wife, and found somebody that loved me, and everything seemed fine, and it wasn't. It was very, very empty. All the things that were successful really weren't that fulfilling. Um, like Tanya said, on the outside, uh, I was done. I mean, I could have had kids and had a house and whatever, and made a lot of money, but it was empty. It was the mid '70s. I had a friend that went to New York, came back, told me that they had brought a group with them, and it was a spiritual group, and come to an open house, and I did. And that was it. I dropped out. My whole life was behind me at that point, because what was inside was something I had to really deal with and find the truth and the love. And um, I dropped out for almost 5 years and did a tremendous amount of work, hours and hours a day, literally, with physical practices, spiritual practices. I was into a lot of Tai Chi at the time, a lot of meditation. I did healing body work. I did hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours of work on myself, work on other people. That's how I got into the holistic industry. One thing led to another. And even though I did all these trainings, all this work, all this spiritual process, there was still a piece that was unfulfilled. I felt so much better than I had ever felt. I felt a sense of myself I had never felt before. And yet, just as Tanya was saying, she's done all this phenomenal work, and it is, these steps along the way were just necessary and appropriate, but it didn't get down to that place where it was just peaceful and fulfilled, and all of the things that I wanted. I wouldn't stop till I got it. I was on a mission from childhood. And so, as it happened, a friend of mine said, "Hey, Barry, I'm going to do this training next week." Sort of how my life unfolded. Somebody just said, "Hey, there's something happening. It sounds going to do it, right?" So it was like, "Well, tell me about it." Well, I said, "Barry, this is the one where if you've done everything else and it hadn't gotten you what you wanted, this is the one that does it." So it was like, sign me up. That was it. That's all I needed to hear. If it could take me to that place that I've been really longing for virtually almost all of my life, I wanted it. And what this training was about that I took, it was called Fisher-Hoffman, it's still called Hoffman, was learning what was the core foundational learning from childhood, what's said to be 80% of all we ever learn in an entire lifetime by the age of 5. So my therapists were telling me all the information from questionnaires that I filled out about what I would have learned, and it was like, it was just opening up so much grief and frustration and disappointment and resentment and anger and all kinds of feelings, recognizing that unbeknownst to my parents, because they really tried to do their best, they just didn't know, but unbeknownst to them, they were setting me up to be very self-sabotaging. And nothing I learned was able to do anything about that. I was basically learned that, this is the way life is. You work hard, you struggle. You're not born with a silver spoon. Um, Life isn't easy. Blah blah blah. On and on. All of these things that, of course, were deeply at the core. They were embodied. They were in my whole being. It wasn't just like it was in my head, but it was my being that had been getting this. This was basic core human learning. And I learned from the Hoffman process that something, I'm still a smart man. I know all this information, but I never learned in school about human development. I never learned about childhood development. I never learned about how we really learn and grow as a human. I learned what I was supposed to do and what I was supposed to be and how life is supposed to work. But I didn't learn these things inside. I learned all about muscles and things like that. I was an athlete. I was a gymnast. I was a ballet dancer. I learned all about how the body functions, but how do I develop as a human? I didn't know that. The spiritual practices didn't teach me that. They taught me the truth of who I'm supposed to be, that I aspire to, and wasn't even close. But I was getting finally this piece of information that made sense. This, at the core, at the very depth of who I was the truths that I was taught, and they weren't even taught directly to me. They were just what was being role modeled and taught and demonstrated in all of these ways. And it was profound. And then they gave me the release methods to get this out of me and to put back in something that would really work. And it was life-changing. All the spiritual stuff that I did, that was phenomenal. But this was the piece that just finalized it. And because I had already been helping people. I was really good with my hands, and I loved to do body work and different kinds of body works. And I did so much of it that people came to me because they heard I was a body worker. So I just developed that reputation from my own practice of it and connection to it. And so I started having clients making money, and then they wanted me to teach them that, and I love to teach. So I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And all of a sudden, opportunity after opportunity came up, and finally even the opportunity to have a licensed state-approved vocational school to teach holistic. So the bottom line was I was already teaching, I was already connecting to people, I was already in this place wanting to do service and share with others my experiences and my healing and what could help them. And this piece came along, and I told the therapist afterwards, I said, is there any way that I can learn this? This is just incredibly valuable, and I so much want to share this with people. And they said, well, we agree. You'd probably be just wonderful at this, because they knew me. And they said they trained me. And so I had my first client in 1981, and I've been doing it ever since. And the process that goes with this, Tanya, is really amazing, because so much of what we do after 7 years of age is all around our mind, our logical, intelligent, rational adult mind that seems to tell us that we're in control and that's running our life. But the reality is, and it's all scientifically proven, psychology knows it, that this deep core underlying material is really what runs our life. As long as it's got what could be called negative programming, have negative outcomes. So that was how I got into this. It was me. It was I had no vision in my childhood and later young adult that I would ever be doing anything like this. Not even close.
Yeah, and so as you were speaking, the words that kept coming to me were spiritual bypassing. And so when we're talking about the missing piece, there's a couple different things that we're referring to here. Barry alluded to it of like, I'm learning all these things from, he was living in an ashram for 5 years, learning these spiritual practices and learning about, okay, this is the truth of who I am, right? Oh yeah, so now it's like we're being taught and we know it here in our brain of, oh, this is the spiritual piece, like this is how you get bliss, and if I just do these practices, I'm going to feel better. And this like skipping over something to get to bliss is what we call spiritual bypassing.
Yeah. Because I was raised to be a smart person, I absorbed all that. I can quote you stuff that I learned 40 years ago still as if it was yesterday. I can chant for 45 minutes by memory some of the spiritual Sanskrit texts from yoga. I mean, I've done them thousands of times because that was my training, to do something and do it well. I followed my training, but I, because of what was underlying and what actually, Tanya, the amazing part is, in all of the spiritual traditions, they all say the same thing, that the depth of what we have as the problem is childhood learning, childhood programming. Yogis call it samskaras, and that's literally what it translates into. And in the yogic how-to Bible called the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali's, it even says the number 2 sutra in all of the sutras. Now, the first one's an introductory sutra, and the second one is Yogaha Chitti Vritti Nirodha, which means the goal of yoga is to still the agitations of the mind. And the agitations of the mind are all of these deep core childhood learning programs. So even though that's clearly there, what certainly comes out, as you probably know, is hello, oh being of light and divine one, and all is well, and life is so beautiful, and
peace and love.
yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to go on that path, but to go in completely is not. It's not in the goal of any of the Buddhic or yogic or Taoist or Muslims or Sufi traditions. None of the great traditions are telling us to go around as if we, are on a high in some ashram. It's basically, they're all telling us the same thing. We are the truth that created us. Tattvamatsi, thou art that. So like the Father, so like the Son, the kingdom of heaven dwells within, on and on and on about all these spiritual truths. And to get there, you have to clean out what's in the way. You have to get rid of delusion. My teacher said, you have to get rid of what really doesn't exist, which was like, huh? And then it was like, yes, these delusions are exactly that. They call them Maya, the veil of illusion. Like
they're veils. Exactly.
They're veils. Yeah, he wore glasses, and so he said, change the prescription of your glasses. It was like, we don't see what's true when we see through these veils. And the goal is not to pretend they're not there or act like they're not there or do what psychology, it's the interesting part, psychology calls it behavioral modification. And so if you think of that, I'm going to modify how I act. Well, modifying how I act doesn't change me. It changes my actions, right? So, am I being generous and kind with you, and have I overextended your limits? And I apologize for that, and I don't want to do that again. Meanwhile, I turn around and say, boy, she is such an asshole, and that Tanya, who does she think she is, and that stuff that's underlying, I still got it, but it's so good to see you. And it's like, I'm not being true to myself. I'm not being genuine. I don't have congruency. So I suffer. I mean, she hasn't suffered by that. I suffer by that. I suffer by being unaccountable to what's real. I suffer for not being responsible to what I need to do for me. I suffer by being pretentious. And this is what we talk about is the missing piece. This is the term for Tanya, that spiritual
bypassing.
I think of a heart operation, but it's like that. It's a spiritual bypass, not really even being in the accountability of what true spiritual practice is about. It's what's the old phrase? A little bit of knowledge is dangerous. Not really having the whole picture, literally taking it out of context. And it's so easy to do that. These great spiritual phrases, when you don't study all of spirituality and you don't put it in the full context of how it works, literally becomes dangerous. Making pretentious connections with people and acting as if, when truly, it would be hard to trust someone who wasn't genuine. It would be hard to trust someone who who you definitely know that they're not really showing up with honesty and accountability. And in life, as humans, I mean, we're social creatures, and our ability to trust each other is what's going to make life really work. Um, Hence, the situation we're in as a planet.
Well, what's so interesting is what you were just alluding to. A personal development is teaching us act as if, right? And change your actions, and then you'll change what's underneath. And then there's this. True. That's why there's so many leaders out there in the personal and spiritual development world that are acting as if, but you're like, I'm not feeling connected to that person. There's an incongruency underneath.
Oh my gosh!
It's not authentic.
There was a gentleman who I don't know personally, but who I don't know what finally happened in his prosecution. He's literally being prosecuted for manslaughter in the Sedona sweat lodge deaths. The 3 deaths for people. And
at the sweat lodge.
Yeah, up until that time, the reality is, I did sweat lodges for years and years and years and years and years. I have no memory of ever seeing an article of a problem, much less what happened under his guidance. So this just was somebody who wasn't really embodying and really being genuine with what they were doing and acting as if. What a terrible thing to have as a karmic burden, to have 3 people have died and other people be seriously injured and hurt.
Under the guise of self-help.
Under the guise of self-help. And not to be judgmental, there's no reason not to make money. But a multi-million-dollar business in self-help is challenging if you're really going to be there for people. It's pretty significant, as you undoubtedly know, to really help one person to deeply heal. And I don't remember charging you hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. It's just unrealistic to be able to do it on a small basis and be able to come up with that kind of income, though there's nothing wrong with making money. That's not my point at all. But certainly there's a question mark around it. There's a giant question mark around where healing has gone in the industry that it's become. And now the amazing thing, Tanya, is that there are studies that are showing that the weekend kind of workshop syndrome is doing more harm than good. It leaves a person with the potential delusion of having something happen, and then the letdown from that is very devastating. You know, I thought, well, it was so wonderful in the workshop. It was a high, no doubt.
Designed to be a high versus actually doing the work. And that's one thing that we're really committed to, is during a weekend immersion, actually doing the work and going to that missing link and the depth, so that it's not just this high, and then it's like afterwards, then how do we integrate that? So there's a huge difference in that.
Yeah,
I want to kind of go in another direction of going back to this whole missing link, and what is that, and so what can you do about that? And specifically, you know, we're talking about this, is what's underneath a lot of it is that self-doubt, right? And not fully owning your self-worth and that self-esteem piece. So I want us to go into that, but before we do that, what we've identified, what Barry's identified, that I'm now, you know, have learned and viscerally experienced, is that there are actually 5 stages of learning, or sorry, 5 stages of healing. And so when we're talking about that, the spiritual bypassing, which we went into, but there's also like this piece in those 5 steps of, the first one is awareness. Really understanding and starting to have the aha. A lot of us stop there though, right? Like we have this aha, oh my God, I see these patterns, I see these connections, and then we stop there. The second stage is acceptance and commitment. So really committing to the process of like, okay, now what am I going to do about this? And we see so much phobia to commitment out there of like, oh, I don't really want to do that. You know, I've had some people say to me, oh, I thought we were just going to be talking about this. And that's how we've been trained, is just do a lot of talking but are we really doing the walking? The walking, this is an active process. These 5 steps of healing are active. They're not passive. We've been taught, though, right, in school to sit at a desk and to passively listen to the teacher, to not actually do the work ourselves, right? So that is this continued process of just have the awareness stop there. But then to really heal that missing piece we're not quite getting to. We actually skip it and we go to step 4. So step 3 is that release and replace. This is, for me, I think the missing link. This is the missing piece for so many people, especially in the spiritual community, because we skip 3 and we go straight to 4, which is we go to replace. And we haven't actually done the release. And so what's happening there is we're just putting these affirmations and these mantras on top of mud. We're putting them on top of what's underneath, which is the self-doubt.
Yeah, it's like having a garden in which the problem with your garden is that there's parasitic weeds that are just at an underlying level, and without dealing with them, you try and plant something, and of course, you're never going to have a potentialized garden. Everything is going to be damaged and inhibited in its growth and beauty from the weeds, the parasites, and so the same thing. We talked earlier about behavioral modification, right? Affirmations are the same thing, trying to behaviorally modify in an environment that is negative. So the best you can come up with is what is called neuroses, which is the conflict between the new learning, the affirmation, and the deep, embedded, embodied in your whole being, these negative learnings. And this is just conflict. And this is what people have. Oh, I love you so much. And it's like, oh, is she going to love me? You know, it's like, am I good enough for her? But I know that I love her, and I can tell her that. And I can tell her how beautiful and how much a child of God she is in every affirmation. And I can tell myself, you know, that I'm lovable, I'm unconditionally lovable, and I deserve love, and I deserve you, and you're the most beautiful thing, and I'm the most beautiful thing. And yet, if I'm in internal conflict, I can't congruently live that way. I'm going to live what's called a mixed message. I'm going to be at times loving and at times not loving, and you're going to go nuts. It's like, who's this guy that's telling me, you know, and showing me how wonderful he is, but can't show up that way. Up and down, up and down.
And I'm laughing right now because right outside the door is the lawnmower. And this is what happens.
All day.
There's all these distractions that are going on. And just like us doing this call, we were supposed to do it at 11. The internet's not working. The power's off. We go to Starbucks. We don't have a connection there. We come back, and and here we go again. Constant distraction. This is our society. It's this constant distraction, these constant circumstances that come up that prevent us from making that commitment and prevent us from really looking at what's really going on. And the thing is, so the question is, well, why? Why do we skip over this? Why do we not want to do that one piece? Why is that the missing piece? From my opinion, and I'd love to also hear yours, for me, I feel like it's because this is the shadow. To actually go back and to replace and to actually go and deal with what is this learning in my subconscious, what is this thing that I learned from childhood, might bring up a lot of painful memories.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel at first like I had the capacity to unconditionally feel those feelings that were going to come up if I dealt with that. And this is why we let the distractions overtake us. It's so much easier to say, oh, the internet's down, let's not do this webinar, versus what would it look like for us to stand in that commitment and do whatever it took, no matter how uncomfortable. And most people are not willing to really, truly go there. They'd rather have the affirmation to put on top. They'd rather be given the magic pill, and they're not actually willing to go and do the work. And so what happens is we're not ever owning our self-worth fully, and we're constantly doubting ourselves because we're not actually dealing with what's really going on. And I'd love to hear what, anything that you want to add.
Yeah. Well, it's a twofold process in that, or let's say two cultures really exist. We've got a subculture that's very powerful now. The culture that is in the yogic community. Yoga is so widespread. So a lot of people are sort of in that culture of exploring spirituality through the principles of yoga that are often not fully dealt with, but the ones they understand it to be. And in doing so, it looks like it's relatively an easy path, right? If I'm loving to all beings, and if I intend to do no harm, and if I have positive thoughts, and if I have all this, it looks like life works, right? And
Yeah,
and this of course is
more
the
the illusion.
spiritual bypass, because internally what's happening is we know that life is not working, just like Tanya said. Her life wasn't working, although it looked on the outside like it was. So those internal programs that we grow up on and that are in our entire being will tell us so many things that are really controlling us. Who do you think you are? You can't change. Success is hard. Change is hard. Don't expect healing to work. Um, there's not enough time. This is huge, right? And then, of course, don't be negative. How many times were you as a child allowed to be negative? How many times were you told, don't be a crybaby? Of course, if you're a guy, well then, of course, no way am I supposed to be negative. Oh, I'm supposed to be strong and powerful and stoic and emotionless and not have feelings and not certainly express them. That's a sign of weakness. And well, if he was a woman, of course, uh, our programming is that you're emotional and you can do all those things, but it's weak. So to get an idea, again, of what's deep and underlying, it's that missing part, because it's continually sabotaging us from making that commitment. And the irony is, Tanya, it is much less painful to heal than it is to keep the issues and to keep going through the consequences and keep going through the internal angst and the internal agitation. So the actual healing of these things is well, you know that it's more harder, in the resistance to it than it is in actually doing it. Actually doing it generates tremendous liberation and tremendous openness and tremendous flow in life. So it's completely paradoxical as to the truth of what goes on, but certainly there's a culture that's like it's not okay to be negative. Which as someone who is deeply immersed in spiritual practices, spending, like you say, years involved in being in ashrams and with true spiritual leaders, this principle of what's called nonviolence, or it's really not being negative. That's not the idea, but it gets misinterpreted. And it always makes me laugh, because the human body and life as we know it is, let's not call it negative, but it's basically that we breathe air in, we breathe out the exhaust, so to speak, of our body. We take food in and we poop, right? I mean, what comes out is not good, right? It's poison, it's toxic, right? We digest food, and inside of us is all the toxicity from this. We take in the air, and there are 2,500 toxins and parasites and pathogens that our immune system is always fighting. So life is a balance. It's a balance between things that could be called negative, things that could be called positive. I mean, if you don't have night, you don't have day. If you don't have what could be called good, you don't have bad. You can't establish moral conduct. If you don't have what could be called positive, or rather negative, you can't have what's positive. But in the end, it's all part of this delusion, right? It's all part of this delusion, because no matter what the negative is, we just don't learn in childhood And with spiritual limitedness of learning, right? Not that spirituality isn't full and complete with understanding, but when you learn only a limited amount of it, it looks like be positive and not negative. Reality is our negativity is our opportunity to grow. It's our opportunity to evolve as human beings. We evolve through learning. We're the only creature on the planet that evolves through learning. Every other creature that we know through research and science has natural instinct built in from the moment of birth. We're the only one that comes with zero. We learn as we grow. So if we're going to learn, it's not going to be because um, God's going to come down and say, Tanya, here's a lesson for the day, dear, and just read it and you're fine. The human process is we're going to learn through experience, and experience is going to have in it the negativity that allows us to have the learning.
So, couple places I want to go with this is we talked about one of these, the missing link in terms of healing is this not replacement. We do that very well. The releasing. Before we go there and talk about, well, how do you release? Like, I do let go. I let go all the time. Yes. That's one of the big, even in this new Disney movie, Frozen, the main song is let it go, letting go, So yes, we hear that a lot, but what does that really mean to really release? But before we go there, I want to dive a little bit into what we wanted to share with you today around specifically the self-doubt and owning your self-worth. Where is that stemming from? How is this related to all of what we've shared as context so far? So let's dive into that a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. So basically, childhood development is going to answer three questions in an overview, let's say. Three questions. First question is, and the key question is, who am I? So this is where self-worth comes in. Who am I? The next question is, who are you? So we have a relationship there. And the third question is, what's this thing that's called life? What's that about? How do I fit in? We live on this planet. It's the only planet that we can really live on. We're built for this planet. We're part of the ecosystem. Well, how am I connected to this? What is it? So in the first question, who am I? This is going to be the essence of our functionality. My self-esteem, my self-confidence, my sense of self is going to allow me to interact with you or with everyone else from a place of functionality or absolute dysfunctionality. If I'm scared of you, if I'm scared of myself, I'm scared of you. So if I don't feel good enough about myself, I don't expect that you're going to like me. I don't expect that you're going to respect me. I don't expect that you're going to see me for who I am. I expect that you're going to see me for who I think I am. And I'm going to act that way. So is it okay if I use your bathroom?
Yes, you can go to the bathroom. You have permission.
Thank you. Do you want me to clean up this? I think I made a mess. I'm sorry. I'll fix it if I broke it. It's like this kind of sense of self-doubt, this kind of sense of low self-esteem. I can't be empowered in that. I can't even be myself in that. And I certainly won't present what would seem like someone who is really lovable. I mean, you might have, oh, poor darling, you might want to mother me, right? You might have a lot of responses to me, but if I was applying for a job, I don't know if I'm going to get that job compared to someone that comes in that looks very self-confident.
I'm going to go to the bathroom now.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to sabotage myself because I'm not going to come across as self-confident. And of course, who's going to want to employ me for a high-level job if they don't think I can trust my own self?
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
So piece that's I'm really seeing is, and for us to kind of describe how the subconscious works. So the subconscious and the logical brain don't speak to each other. And so what studies have shown is 80% of what you learn is before the age of 5. And it's all on that subconscious level. You don't actually develop the new brain, the logical brain, fully until you're 7. And so that's when we start to go to school and we start to learn more in the logical way, right? So all of this, like that little kid interaction that we just had, what's so interesting about this is we don't even, we can't even see that we're doing it today, and we can't even see that it was coming from our childhood of this is how we interacted with mom and dad. And that's what's going on. That's what's underlying in the subconscious that's them bumping up against, but I know this, right? Like, I know these things. I should know these things, right? Because these two things don't really, they're missing each other. They're not quite connected. And so that's what's going on, of this is a complete blind spot for you because we're not aware of these patterns and where they actually came from childhood.
Yeah. And so what happens is that when my logical brain develops, one, I get to realize that I don't like what I learned. I don't like how I feel, and without being able to do something about it, without having understood what can I do about that, how can I clear that, how can I make a positive change from where it's coming from. What I do learn in the culture is we're going to teach you how to act. We're going to teach you how to be a man. We're going to teach you how to share and interact. So, hi, Tanya. I'm Barry Green. Nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you, and I'm really impressed to meet you. And I have something very important I want to show you. Right? So I put on this facade. I put on this shell over all this other stuff, and eventually that shell is not going to be able to sustain what's underlying. So I'm going to have my doubts. I'm going to have my fears. And what we know in psychology and the scientific research behind it is that if I can stay, so to speak, present, if we could be having a conversation and I'm really with you and I'm talking about specific details and I'm connected, then I'm not in that subconscious at that moment. But what we know that's interesting is when I have a thought that's not about the moment. Like you might ask me, Barry, do you remember what time our meeting is? I'm going, what time is our meeting? I'm thinking. At the moment that we have a thought, the subconscious becomes active. Because that thought takes us either past or present. And the present moment can hold us in what is really happening. But once we're out of that present moment, the subconscious is there. And the interesting thing is, the statistic is that the average person has 5,000 to 10,000 thoughts on a pretty decent day, not on a stressful one, which means that virtually the majority of the time, the subconscious has a chance to be operative. And what we know, again, statistically and from research, is that in the entire amount of what's in the subconscious, roughly 75% of it is what we call negative.
And so there's so much talk about having awareness, of being conscious, right? But that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's like, it's one thing to know where the stuff's coming from, to, like, you're listening to us today, you know, you're getting an understanding and you're learning and you're having ahas right now, but, you know, and actually doing the deeper work to fully release it so that it's no longer sabotaging you, that's a whole other ballgame. So let's talk a little bit about that. And it's like, okay, well, how do I release? You know, what is that all about, and why is that important in this process here?
Yeah, well, there's a number of techniques that have been clearly shown to get into the subconscious, to be able to release out of the subconscious. And then, of course, once that subconscious is open and there's been a uprooting, so to speak, you got a hole there. You think of a garden, you know, where the weed came out, and then you just put some new fertile seeds in there, right, and close it up and nurture it and cultivate it, and then, of course, nature will take over and do the rest. You have a fruitful, abundant garden. So there's techniques that work at a so to speak, like a mental nervous system level. They're techniques that work through the body. They're techniques that work through emotions. All of them are equally as effective, and all of them take uh, a certain amount of energy. Um, in physics, there's what's called a boiling point, which is the idea that you put the water on the stove and you turn the fire on, and it's hot. You don't stick your hand in the fire, but the water's not boiling. And it just gets hot, it gets hot, it gets hot, it gets hot. But at a certain point, and only at a certain point, does it start to boil. When it starts to boil, literally, there is a scientific change that occurred. And it's the same change that happens when water turns to ice. So if you're going to go ice skating, even though it looks and sort of feels like it's frozen, if it hasn't reached that frozen point, you're in trouble. So in a sense of clearing ourselves, there's the same idea. And we can do a lot of work. But if we don't get to that energetic level where it's really pulled out, then it's still there. There's still a part of it that's there. So all of the different techniques that are there require, remember you talked about the idea of that commitment?
Yes.
So
this is why this is so important.
Yeah, there's the ability to do so much work and not really fully be in that energy of commitment. So, no longer am I a bad person. 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 Right? It's like I'm sort of mechanical in that. There's not a lot of energy. If somebody was standing by me and listening to me, they wouldn't have a sense that I'm really doing some powerful work, right?
They wouldn't believe you.
Yeah, if I get to that place where I am really committed, that I want this out of me, and I'm going to get that out of me, and I'm going to do what it takes to get it out of me, and then I'm going to go, I am no longer a bad person. I am no longer a bad person. Somebody's going to say, whoa, that guy is really, trying to get something out of him. He really means what he's saying, right? This is the idea of really making the clearing. Going through the motions won't do it. It has to have a certain energetic behind it. Even if you use the technique without the energetic behind it, it's not going to get the full result that a person can get from it.
And so, it's no secret as to the clearing methods that we use. The way I can describe it best to you is we use a cancel out statement with the statement that you heard or the statement that you're wanting to clear out. So we use the clearings, the cancel statement, no more, and then whatever it is that you're wanting to let go of. So no more, you aren't enough, or you're not a good person, right? And always with that you of this is what you heard, this is what you learned in childhood, is that there's something wrong with you, versus the I statement. So there's nothing for us to hide in terms of like here are the methods. However, and this is what I found for myself, of Barry could have just given me an audio and said, here's how you clear, right? But for me to actually connect with my commitment, and for me to actually get to that place where I really felt it in my body that I wanted to let this go, required some work. It required me really connecting with this process and having the support from someone when I wanted to give up on myself and when I doubted myself, because the self-doubt is the biggest deterrent to this process. And so it really took something for me to find the willpower, to find that strength to really go and say, yes, like I really want to let this go. And so I used all these different clearing techniques, but really if it wasn't for Barry being able to point out the ones that were coming up, preventing me from clearing the ones that I wanted, right? It's like he was able to shine that mirror for me in terms of, and to coach. Oh my God, yeah. How many times that we had sessions where he would just be coaching me while I was doing the work, and how many times I would want to come in and say, Barry, do it for me, heal me, fix me, clear me, right? But
Yeah,
it's like it doesn't actually work for someone else to be telling you it versus you doing the effort yourself. And
absolutely.
so that's what we're offering. And that's what we're here for, is to really hold that space and to guide people because, and I know from experience how difficult this is to try to do this on your own.
Yeah.
It's virtually impossible to
It's almost
just, for
impossible.
us to just give you a list and say, all right, here's what there is for you to clear. And so what we've come up with is what I call the School for the New Generation Leader. And in my book, Open Your Heart, How to Be a New Generation Feminine Leader, I talk about this concept of um, what are we doing for the next 7 generations? And what are we doing to sustain this planet? That, for me, is the central question for leadership in our world today, because we don't really have a lot of time. We see what's going on out there. We really need to take action now. This is an active process of healing that is required for our planet. And so what that work is to go back for those generational woundings that we've been talking about, all this learning from childhood, that veil of illusion, and to rip that veil from over our eyes so that we can start to see clearly by doing this release work, by really letting go on a visceral level, and letting go in the subconscious, letting go of those last 7 generations so we can step in with a clear slate for the next 7 generations. So that's why we call it the School for the New Generation Leader. And what we're doing is guiding people through this process, and having you come to spend an immersion weekend with us so that we can coach you, we can motivate you, we can guide you as you're doing the work, you're making those connections. Where is this coming from? And how do I release it? Actually doing the release work and then the replacement. And really stepping into the truth of who you are, which is what you've been told so much by the spiritual gurus, but haven't actually been given the tools to fully let go of that illusion and to actually see it clearly, and to be who, to answer those questions of who am I, why am I here, and who are you, and what is this thing called life? That's what we're getting to the root of. And really, it's about us each becoming the leader of our own life, taking that full responsibility of my impact on this planet matters. What I have to say matters. And what you have to say matters too. That for me is it's just the central piece here, is that congruency and that responsibility that is part of leadership.
Yeah, it's hard to really help people at this point in time when there's a mixed message going on. Um, that mixed message is because we haven't cleared. So people pick up on, we say one thing, and yet they feel another thing coming. And the idea is for the leader of a new generation is that you have to be congruent. Who you are has to really show up. You can't just talk the talk. You really have to walk the walk, and that means doing your own healing, which is the actual ancient tradition and the famous motto, heal or heal thyself. So you simply can't give what you haven't got. So if you haven't really cleared these things, it's going to be hard, virtually impossible, to guide someone where you haven't even been. And this is the idea. Clear this out. This is a process that's supposed to be done one time in your life. Do it to its depths. Finish the job. Clean out all of that delusion from the past. Move on. Move on with a life that's functional, a life that works, a life that teaches how to get your needs met, how to relate to others, how to be able to have trust and faith and have spirituality that's really rooted in genuineness, versus some sort of airy principle that's not real. The the reality is we're a project that's always unfolding. We're a process that's unfolding. We have a body that's going to get sick. We have a body that's going to age. Nature itself is constantly in cycle and change. And so when we go with these principles that seem like they're just ideal, they're perfect ideas, they don't represent the life that we live. They are perfect and ideal, But you have to get to that state that the ancient ones got to. And of course, they did it when they had years of time to devote. I mean, their life was incredibly simple thousands of years ago. They could take off a year, and somebody else could help on the farm. Somebody else could, in the community, help raise the kids. They didn't have taxes to pay. They didn't have insurance to deal with. They didn't have any cars. They didn't have, I mean, there was no electronics. There was nothing to break down. There was no repairman. Our life was incredibly simple. So they had the time, and they had the environment, and they had the peace around them. They had the pure air in which to breathe, functional air, and have bodies be more powerful and vital. They had a time to sit and to just meditate and go into these deep places and really be able to go to where these spiritual principles are designed to be lived at. But in the life that most of us have, the spiritual principles are true, but we have to apply them to the reality of who we are, where we are, and how we are. And that's what becoming true to ourselves is about. Look, I I have what's called a potty mouth. I'll come out with things where that's just a bunch of shit, and it's like it feels. I mean, I'm not going to say it in the middle of a funeral somewhere where it's, but the point I'm making is I'm not going to be pretentious. That's an expression, and it feels very congruent for who I am. And by being that congruency, it's not taken as something that is nasty or whatever. It's just like, oh, that's Barry. He has a potty mouth, But like we get to love people who we see are just being themselves and are totally at peace and totally at harmony with that, and just happens to be their quality of personality, which is human, all the variations in personality. So what, as you quite well know, we're trying to do is to help a person just, like we talked about, find that missing piece that allows them to be literally at home in your own skin, in your own body, in your own heart, in your own head, so that life is just peaceful. Peaceful, not the constant agitation. Am I okay? Is that the right thing to say? Did I make a mistake? Just like we were talking about today, things weren't unfolding as planned, right? So we had choices all along the way. We could bitch and moan about it and get all agitated and upset, but for the most part, it felt like we just went with the flow, and right now it feels very comfortable and very easy, and I'm really grateful to get a chance to make this and share this with people, and it feels like, we're really doing that and getting to the points we want to make. And yeah, it was later than we had planned, and I'm sure that'll still work, and the people that want to see it, they'll find it. And that's the kind of trust that we're talking about in this work, and trusting in life, and trusting that life works, and that our life works, and that we work when we're really being ourselves.
And that the right people will find us, because
absolutely,
that's how healing works.
Yeah.
You're given, life is giving you exactly what you need at every given moment.
Yeah.
And so if you're listening to this and you've resonated with this message, and you're like,
you're the person that's supposed to.
You're feeling that pull. We have a link below with more information about the upcoming program, and then you can reach out to us directly. And if we don't have a program currently going on, we do offer this work one-on-one. The group is really effective because it's a very integrated and holistic structure, where you're having the retreat, so you're able to dive in deep, and you're doing that with the group accountability, plus you're getting the one-on-one with me and Barry. So we've really created a holistic approach to this event, or to this process, with the School for the New Generation Leader. And if it's like an urgency and it's full, then we can always work out for you to work with one of us one-on-one. So that link is below to find out more information on the upcoming program. You can also reach out to us at info@ tribal-truth.com. That's info@tribal-truth.com for just to reach out to us. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe you'd like to see, how this process can benefit you. We are open. We're here to lift the veil. We're not here to keep secrets from you, but we're really here to be of service and to really share this process with as many people as possible. And because we're both committed to sustaining this planet, sustaining humanity to keep up with this planet for the next 7 generations. So thank you so much for joining in with us on this Google Hangout.
Yes.
And I'm sure that we'll be planning more of these, so we'll see you very soon.
Adios.